Welcome to today's virtual Cabinet meeting. Before we start the formal business of the meeting, I must remind you that the audio of this meeting is being live broadcast on the Council's website, and the video of the meeting will be published after the meeting. I would like to introduce the officers supporting today's meeting. Councillors in attendance will be introduced shortly. Mike Hill, Chief Executive, Mike Avery, Assistant Director Planning and Regeneration, Alison Ball, Assistant Director Finance, Helen Barrington, Director of Organisational Development and Democratic Services, and finally myself, Alec McClark.
Okay.
Leader.
Thank you. So we'll move over and welcome everybody to the meeting. Again, we're still on virtual, which is rather unfortunate, but we'll do what we can do with it. So a call for apologies for absence.
Leader, we haven't had any apologies from any councillors, but just to confirm for everybody at home, we've got present today Councillor Clark, the Chair, Councillor Payne, Vice Chair, Councillor Barnes, Councillor Ellis, Councillor Gregory, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor McCrossan and Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. So I'll move it to correct record item 2, which is on pages 5 to 9. And that is a meeting held on the 2nd of July 2020. I'll move that. Seconded?
Seconded.
We agreed?
Yep.
Thank you. We agreed. That's done. Declarations of interest. Anybody wishing to declare an interest in any of the following items? There are none declared. Thank you. We'll move on quickly to item 4, which is I'm pleased to see this come along. Arnold Marketplace Regeneration Scheme, and I think Joelle's going to do a lead into that somewhere.
I am, Chair. Yes, I'm here.
Are you there?
And we have a presentation as well that Alex is going to chair. So before I get started, just on a personal note, I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today to be able to present this report to you and this scheme. And after today, and the purpose of the report is to make sure that we update members on the progress of the Marketplace redevelopment project, but also to seek the necessary approvals for the final scheme of the redevelopment of Arnold Marketplace to make sure we get the delegations we need, the recommendations and the approvals to be able to enable the project to progress. If you bear with me, there is a lot of information in the Cabinet report, and I am going to go through all the pertinent points, but please be aware that there's a lot more detail in the detailed business case as part of the appendices, and also obviously all the detail within the Cabinet report. Before I go on to go through the various recommendations and approvals that we're seeking, I'd like to just provide you with a summary of the work done to date and the journey that we've been on to get to this point. I say that, but actually I'm only halfway. I joined halfway through the process. So what I'm about to describe in terms of the first few phases was actually something that was done before I arrived at the council. But I think, as I say, it's really worthwhile to understand the journey that Gedling Borough Council has been on to get to the point where we are today. So as you can see on the slide, the project was to acquire and to redevelop Arnold Marketplace, and it had 3 distinct phases. So the first phase started back in December 2006, when officers received approval to enter into talks to acquire the Arnold Marketplace from the then private owner. This was following overwhelming support from the local community and the desire to see the marketplace in public ownership, but also for the market to flourish. The site was acquired by agreement under the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, and this power enabled the land to be acquired for the purposes of redevelopment or improvement, which brings about subsequent improvements to the economic, social and environmental well-being of the area. Alongside this, and at the same time of us acquiring the land, we also were in talks with the D2N2 LEP to be able to secure some external funding to help to facilitate and purchase the site. This provided the funding to secure the land, but also as part of that there was a pre-compliance agreement which tied the council to submitting a detailed business case to the LEP for their approval to demonstrate that the funding had delivered 32 full-time jobs and keeping the market. Phase 2 included the council operating the temporary market on the site, whilst the longer term redevelopment plans were being considered. This included the provision of 24 new market stalls and the demolition of the existing market canopies, structures and associated buildings. The site was cleared and made safe, and part of the site was enclosed with hoarding to make sure that the market could still operate. Since this happened from March 2019, the temporary market has been successfully operating 3 days a week, with approximately 9 to 10 regular market traders occupying over 16 stores. In addition, we ran the flea market on Wednesday evenings through last summer. The site was also used for the annual Christmas market and light switch on festivities, which went down very well within the town centre. And throughout of this, the property team who were tasked with operating the market have been working closely with the economic growth team to further promote the market and increase the number of store holders. Phase 3 was the phase that was linked to actually the redevelopment of the marketplace, and this began in earnest in November 2019 when the newly appointed town centre project manager came on board. As detailed in the accompanying business case to the project, a number of high-level feasibility appraisals were prepared through a design-led process based on the original concept plans submitted as part of the funding agreement. This initial work included preparing spatial development options, exploring market demand and assessing legal and financial constraints. A preferred option for the outline redevelopment scheme emerged from this process, and an internal consultation with officers, as well as the cross-party working group and SLT, created a situation where we could go for portfolio holder approval in February 2020 to allow us to do public consultation on the outline redevelopment scheme. Following this portfolio holder approval, officers undertook a 4-week public consultation on the outline proposals between the 24th of February and the 23rd of March. Now, I have to say that was pre-COVID, so those photos that you can see feel a bit strange now because people are very close to each other, but it was a time before COVID was struck, so the 2-metre social distancing didn't apply. The main purpose of the consultation was to seek feedback from residents, visitors and businesses about the initial ideas for the Marnell Marketplace. There are a series of events held and opportunities for people to see the plans and speak directly with officers about the redevelopment. This was primarily led by the Economic Growth and Regeneration team, but supported by colleagues within the property and planning teams. Over the course of the consultation period, we engaged with around 2,000 people. This included a specific event for businesses and opportunities for around 1,500 members of the public to come and speak to us directly. We also received 463 online survey responses, and actually the feedback was overwhelmingly supportive. 3 out of the 4 people that responded were very supportive of the proposal and wanted to see it happening as quickly as possible. We had quite a lot of other feedback that we wanted to collect, and interestingly, I've detailed it all in paragraph 1.7, but one of the main things that came from that is the idea of supporting independent retail, local businesses, startups, and the idea of having specialist market sellers were the top priorities for residents and visitors to Arnold. Feedback also included the need to have a new public space on the marketplace and to have one that could hold community focused events and activities. And there was also the comment that came through quite a lot in terms of having good quality toilet provision within the town centre. Since the consultation, officers have continued to work on developing a final scheme, including the building design and public realm. We wanted to respond to comments and feedback received from the public, but also in the internal comments and part of the wider project team. Alongside this, the final detailed design scheme was prepared, and finance and regeneration officers have been investigating the affordability and financial projections of delivering the scheme. This approach has helped to inform the building layout and ensure that it is tailored to benefit local independents and startup businesses wherever possible. This has also been based on feedback from commercial agents that we appointed to help with the business case, Cushman Wakefield. Before we move on to the final scheme, I thought it was quite a nice opportunity just to actually stop and to see what the council bought back in the beginning of the process. The site itself had 90 permanent stores that, as you can see there, were run down and neglected, along with a series of makeshift buildings running along the eastern edge. The next slide shows the proposed redevelopment of the scheme from the same angle. This scheme includes the construction of a new 2-storey landmark building, and as you can see is vastly different from the site that we first acquired. The building is situated between the existing Methodist Church and King George V Park. The building has been orientated to frame the new marketplace, as well as creating a new eastern gateway into the town from Gedling Road. A new public square is included within the proposal to create a central focal point for the market and to provide an external flexible space for holding events and performances in the heart of the town. And this image shows it without the market stall, so as an event space. The next slide shows a fly-through of the scheme, just to get you a better idea of how the scheme fits in with the surroundings and all the details. And while that's playing, I just want to talk you through some of the main points. The ground floor provides 320 square metres of floor space and is split into 7 starter business units, all with frontages addressing the proposed public space. They all have a toilet, a tea point, and have access from the rear, and have been designed to be a blank canvas to allow occupiers to customise them in accordance with their own requirements. We've also sought expert advice from an independent retail expert who's done a lot of work for us on this scheme. And part of the feedback has been making sure that this is as blank canvas as possible for independent businesses to come and make their own mark, but also to make sure there's the flexibility within the scheme so that actually the walls between the units can be brought down if required, allowing units to be combined. And again, that's all making sure that we can adapt to changing economic climate and market demands. As you can see, the fly-through then shows how the market will be accommodated on the site. And the end unit here that you can see has been designed to be a cafe potentially, or a food or beverage outlet. And that's making sure that we can then tie into the wider town centre and to have an area of open seating. The first floor has been designed to be a flexible commercial space, so actually it's one big space at the minute. And this floor will also house a meeting room, which was something that had fed back in terms of for community use, but also for independent retailers on the ground floor, to be able to have a space to maybe do sessions or training and workshops. The findings from the business case, and supported by Cushman & Wakefield's feedback, suggest that this first floor should be as flexible as possible to start off with. And so the idea is that we will have it as a basic shell, so a first fit out option. We will market that as for office accommodation for an occupier to come in, but with the opportunity that if that doesn't work, that there is a scope to do an option B, which is to subdivide it into smaller office units, or actually to go with option C, which would be to provide service offices. Now, at the minute, we don't want to go down option B or C because the market advice is that we stick with it being a shell for one office user. But if either of the other options were to be progressed and there would be additional capital investment required, we would be looking at doing a further business case and cabinet approval. But as I say, the feedback initially is to go with option A. I do want to touch on the marketplace because actually part of it is making sure that we've got a contemporary public realm and public space, over 700 square metres. We've designed it to be a main focal point in the proposals, and the building actually creates the backdrop and frames the space. The details in terms of landscaping and lighting, seating and paving, they've all been designed with counter-terrorism measures in mind, but also to make sure that there is a usable space for our residents to want to spend their time and to dwell. To the rear of the scheme is a service yard, and this is a private space with controlled access off Gedling Road. The layout proposals have considered the access and turn-in, making sure that large delivery vehicles and emergency vehicles can also access the site, whilst also making sure that there isn't any problems off Gedling Road. There are also 10 parking spaces to the rear of the building, which will be allocated to tenants of the first floor. Following advice from Cushman & Wakefield, it may be that there is further parking provision required, and as the council owns and controls further car parks in the area, we feel that this is something that we could further consider if it's required. Another point I just want to make with the scheme is there is a small market office and toilet facilities for market traders, which is part of the ground floor footprint. Now, this is accessed purely from the service yard and will be a key holder access only. But the idea with having that facility there is that the traders have a point to be able to spend a bit of time in if they need to, but also for the council to have a base within the development itself, but also the wider town centre, which will also help with the market operations going forward and also the wider regeneration of the town centre. There have been a number of measures of sustainable design features that have been incorporated within the proposals, and we are very keen to make sure that wherever possible, the building is designed to be a fabric first approach. So making sure that wherever possible, the building and the components that make up the building fabric does the work in the first instance without relying on the technology. But there are a few things that I just want to point out here. So there will be low level energy LED lighting across the scheme. There will be low water use fittings with restricted flow. We've got a sustainable urban drainage system in place. So actually the water will then be fed into the tree pits and to make sure that any runoff goes there before it goes into the paved areas. And as you've probably seen from the fly through, there are solar panels that are planned to be installed on the roof. Just want to say on that one that is going to be funded through the Carbon Reduction Initiative capital budget, and so isn't necessarily part of this. This isn't part of this scheme, but the provision will be made on top of the roof. I want to flag up, and one of the feedback from the public consultation was the need for good quality toilet provision within the town centre. And actually, this isn't anything new. You're all well aware of that. And that's exactly why there is a capital budget already in place for the provision and improvement of public toilets in the wider Arnold Town Centre. We did look at whether we could accommodate a public toilet as part of this development, but actually the feedback from the commercial agents suggested that it actually make the ground floor units far less desirable for tenants, but also potentially have the impact of the commercial floor space that we can actually let out. So the decision was made that we would look at improving or providing new toilet facilities elsewhere in the town centre. Overall, the redevelopment scheme will deliver wider positive outcomes to the town's high street economy by supporting with the existing high street retailers and traders. The quality of the new ground floor unit outlets and upper commercial space will focus on providing a different offer to the town centre and encourage more local businesses to the area. The public square will provide a central area for events and activities to take place, increasing the footfall to this part of the town and creating a more attractive environment for the market. In turn, this will provide a greater choice of local providers, products and experience to shoppers, visitors and residents using the town, thereby stimulating the regeneration of the town centre. This ties in nicely with the council's reset strategy and specifically the economic bounce back plan, and being able to show other investors that the council is willing to invest in Arnold Town Centre, thereby hopefully stimulating other investments elsewhere. Now, as I've gone through the scheme, hopefully that gives you all a good idea of what the scheme is. And actually that leads me nicely onto the recommendations, because the first recommendations, officers are seeking approval for the final redevelopment scheme of the Arnold Marketplace as shown in Appendix B, subject to budget approval and any necessary planning permissions being obtained. As I've mentioned before, to accommodate the final scheme, there has been a detailed business case prepared to justify the design, size and use of the buildings. And as part of this, the financial aspects have been balanced between the need to invest in Arnold Town Centre and the potential clawback linked to the pre-compliance funding agreement with the LEP. Whilst it's accepted this is not a commercial scheme and will require subsidy based on cautious assumptions, it will have a significant impact on the regeneration of Arnold Town Centre, and we believe it will help to stimulate the economy in a post-COVID-19 environment. So therefore, with this in mind, officers are seeking approval for the final redevelopment scheme as I have just detailed and shown in Appendix B. Moving on to recommendation 2. If approved, the scheme is now at the stage where an application for planning permission can be submitted. Members are therefore asked to give the Chief Executive authority to submit the planning application for the proposed scheme. And actually, as you can see on screen there is a proposed amendment to that recommendation to also add in consultation with the leader of the council. So if Alec, if you could note that as in terms of part of the recommendations and amended, that's something we would like members to consider on top of what's in the report. Moving forward, if with the third recommendation, and again you can see that there's a highlighter change there in blue, we are seeking delegated authority to the Service Manager for Economic Growth and Regeneration to make any minor amendments to the approved scheme as required during the planning process, and that will be in consultation with the leader of the council and the portfolio holder for growth and regeneration. Should any more extensive changes be required, officers will come back to Cabinet with a revised scheme for approval. Moving on to recommendation 4, as part of the earlier phases of the work, there was already an agreed capital budget for this redevelopment scheme of around £1 million. The details of this are included in the table on paragraph 4.2.3 in your papers. The final redevelopment scheme is projected to cost £2.55 million and therefore requires a further £1.5 million to be agreed to cover the capital costs of this scheme. Officers are seeking approval to use £255,000 from the earmarked business rates pool reserve, which is set aside for the investment in economic regeneration projects to be used. Furthermore, officers are also seeking approval to finance the remaining £1.3 million required for the capital costs of the scheme through prudential borrowing. These figures do not include the additional options for the first floor fit out, as I mentioned before. And as I said, options, if you did want to progress with options B or C, that would be subject to a further business case and Cabinet approval. So we're actually going with we want to progress with option A on the first floor. The second aspect of the funding and linked to approval 5 is the financing of the scheme with the revenue implications. So this is basically essentially keeping the building running and servicing the debt from the prudential borrowing versus the income that we'll receive from renting the building out. In order to understand the revenue implications, a detailed financial appraisal was undertaken by our finance colleagues, informed by the external consultant Cushman & Wakefield's feedback, but also underwent sensitivity testing. A number of assumptions were included within this work, and these are all detailed in paragraph 4.3.1 to paragraph 4.3.4 in your reports. On the whole, the external consultant's advice and considering the economic climate, we took a cautious approach with these assumptions, and that's to make sure that we understood the potential subsidy this scheme may need if there were vacant units on the site, and with the uncertainty with some of the economic climate and with COVID-19 and with Brexit and potentially with a second wave of COVID-19. So overall, the scheme has been assessed on a whole life cost basis over 40 years and includes all operating cash flows, including the revenue implications of repaying the borrowing back. Over the 40-year period, the scheme has an estimated total deficit of £413,000 based on those cautious assumptions. This equates to around a subsidy of about £10,000 each year, which would need to be met from the council's revenue budget. The details of that is set out in paragraph 4.3.7. In order to cover the annual predicted shortfall of £10,000, officers are proposing to use the surplus revenue budgets within the Economic Growth and Regeneration team from a previous vacant post. However, in the short term and on the first year of delivery, there will be a deficit predicted of £126,500, and officers are seeking for this to be funded through a one-off contribution for the Economic Development Reserve as detailed in recommendation 5. It is worth noting here that this report has been prepared on information pre-COVID-19, and therefore there could be material uncertainty in the market conditions going forward, which may further impact on occupancy and affordable rents. This could have a negative impact on the affordability of the scheme for a period of time until the market recovers, and that has been considered and included within the report under the financial implications section. The way the scheme has been designed, though, is that it is a flexible commercial space and which can be repurposed if required. And so this is something that we've tried to do throughout the scheme to try and build in that flexibility. The sixth recommendation, nearly there, the sixth recommendation is that officers are seeking Cabinet agreement to amend the prudential indicators for 2021-22 as shown in Appendix C, allowing it then to be referred to Council for full approval. This is required to reflect the additional £1.3 million of borrowing required for the final costs of the scheme. And finally, recommendation 7. Officers are asking Cabinet to note the work done to date, and in terms of that journey, the fact that we are very close to the end. Our next steps, if approved today, is we'll submit the planning application swiftly, as in next week, and we'd agree the final funding submission to the LEP. We will then work with contractors through the SCAPE framework to start the delivery on the site. And we're expecting to be on site, pending approval today, and at Council, to be on site in January, and for the building and the public realm to be ready for Christmas 2021. So that's the recommendations, that's the report. Chair, I don't know if you have any specific questions or comments.
Yeah, excuse me. Thanks, Joe. Excellent report there, and you've made it quite easy for us to understand. And by the time we've been, I think I was looking the other day, I mentioned to you, I think it was 2012 when we first brought this up, and there's been a lot of work that's gone into it. And I would like to place on record that our thanks as a Cabinet, our thanks as the controlling party here at Gedling for all that excellent work that's gone off to bring it. So every time we've sort of got over one hurdle, from the case of buying it, taking it down, doing what we do with it, there's something come up, and we've got COVID-19, which is not easy to deal with. But I think it fits entirely where the government wants to go in restructure and building and making the country give something for people to be proud of, you know, across the borough, and hopefully it will be an attraction to people to come along here, not only just to the market but to other things. So you know, with a great thanks to you, your team, and also to the legal side, because I know legal's been pouring over it. We love lawyers, don't we? But they've been pouring all over it. And so if it's correct, then it looks correct, and it looks an excellent project. We need to build it. We need to back it. The people out there need to back it. And some businesses, again, reminding people the country is built on small businesses, will hopefully come and engage with us and join in there. So I'm open for questions or anything that anybody that's got to say to Joe. I was going to start with Jenny, I think, is first. Jenny?
Yeah. Have I unmuted?
Yeah, you're unmuted.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Excuse me, I've got a cough.
Just echo what you say about the thanks to Joe and Lee and all the other staff who've put together a really comprehensive report here, some of which we are familiar with because we've seen parts of it before. But it really pulls together all the information and the detailed work that's happened, the feasibility studies. It's fortunate that the consultation period was almost over when COVID struck. So fortunately, we got the majority of that done. And as you know, was overwhelmingly positive for the regeneration. I think that the pictures today, having seen them again, just show what an exciting project it is, and shows the confidence that we've got in our town centre in Arnold, but also in other places, to encourage people to come to us. Absolutely delighted to see the panels on the top and the air source heat pumps, which will go inside to provide heat and cooling. Absolutely wonderful. Joe and I have been over this, I don't know how many times now. It feels as if we're almost there with the planning application imminent. So it will be wonderful when we get to this time next year and we've made a really good start. But superb report. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Is anyone else? David, see your hand.
Yes, thank you, Lee. That's my hand. Yes. Yeah, I'd like to back up what you and Jenny have said, and we're pleased to see this and commend officers the amount of work that's done. I don't think this is seen by the public. You know, I think a lot of people expected that we'd buy the market on the Friday and by the Monday it'd be completely different. Just no idea what goes into it. I think the proposals seem to tick all the boxes. all the things we've talked about in different forums about supporting local business and flexibility for other activities. And I'm not sure if it's in here or if it's somewhere else. Somebody described the future of high streets has been the Mars approach, somewhere to work, rest, and play. And I think we're getting there with this. I do have a specific question though. Could Joe unpack the table on 4.3.7? It just seems I can't quite follow some of the assumptions. It seems that year 5 things take a nosedive. Is that because of churn, or is it something I've missed?
Joe.
Thanks, Chair. So the table in 4.3.7 makes it look very straightforward and simple, and it's far from that. So actually, finance colleagues have done a lot of work behind the scenes to get to that point. There'll be various reasons for the changes, and part of that is actually linked to the idea that we've modelled it on a 3-year lease. So each of our tenants, we worked on the basis that after 3 years they would go. Now, the biggest issue is that the first floor, the way it's modelled, is that it's not going to be occupied until the first 18. It'll be vacant for 18 months, and then it'll be for a 3-year period. So it's just the kind of the drop of that income when there's a void. So that's why it drops down. So your first floor is a significant income. That then falls away after that time frame, and then it's vacant for a year. That's how it's been modelled. And as I say, it's been trying to be cautious. One of the things that we're trying to do, especially with that first floor, is to work with office providers. There's various companies out there that would actually take a building, a floor like that, and then put their own, say, serviced offices in. So the property team are already doing some work on trying to make sure that we reduce the risk of having that first floor vacant, but that's the reasons. And I'm sure that if you wanted more detail, I'm sure my colleagues in finance will be happy to provide you with all the details, assumptions and modelling, but that's the biggest issue in year 5, and obviously we try to ensure that didn't happen.
If I can just come back, thanks for that. I suppose it's reassurance that years 6 and 7 are going to be more like years 2, 3 and 4 than year 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
John.
Yeah. And I've got Michael first, and then you, Peter.
Sorry, go on, Peter. You get John. Let Peter go first.
Okay, Peter.
I think I've been on the council 40 years. I remember when this building was built, the council offices, everybody said, well, a lovely building. And what we're doing on Front Street with the market is exactly what we've done here. We brought prestige to the borough and prestige to Arnold, and I'm sure the people in Arnold and the borough will appreciate what we've done in this borough. We've probably got the best development in the boroughs in Nottinghamshire, and we'll continue to do so. So I think it's a wonderful idea and a wonderful project. Thank you.
Yeah. Michael.
Yeah, just to echo what you said, Leader, just to say a huge thank you to Joe, to Lee, to Joe and Lee, really, specifically, who I think in their relatively short periods of time with us at the council have shown, not only a huge degree of expertise and commitment here, but actually a passion and enthusiasm for the project. They've really brought to life the aspiration that was set out by us as an administration. And I think more widely than that, John, to echo what you said, Mike Hill as the chief executive and his senior leadership team, Alison, Mike Avery, Alison Ball, Mike Avery, David Wakelin, Helen Barrington, and all the teams that sit behind them, who we can't mention here today, but we should pay our thanks to. This report is exemplary. It goes into a huge amount of detail. It covers every single risk and opportunity. It picks up on the aspirations of elected members. And I think, John, it demonstrates what can be achieved by local government, even in the face of the most difficult financial position that we've seen over the last decade, that we're still ambitious for the town centre, that our ambition meets the ambition of our residents and our businesses in the town centre, and that when you combine political will and leadership with first-class public service and expertise from officers in local government, you get the results that Peter's just described. And Peter's been on the council for more than 40 years. And I think to see this development, in Arnold, which has so desperately been needed, you can see the joy on Peter's face. And I think it's, absolutely remarkable. You think about some of the outstanding buildings we used to have in Arnold, the Carnegie Library, the British School, the swimming baths, which were devastating.
Theatre.
Yeah, the Bonington Theatre that were devastatingly ripped down. You think about some of the high class work that Bob Massey and others have done to remember the history of Arnold, and I think this is respecting our history, respecting our past, but also looking towards the future as well. And I think, you know, the other person who deserves a huge amount of credit, John, is Jenny Hollingsworth as a cabinet member, to have steered this through politically and to give them that strategic oversight to this project. It was a manifesto commitment in 2015 for us as an administration. We restated that ambition in the election in 2019. And as you rightly said, John, we were itching to try and get this moving even before the 2015 election. And I think, as David says, you know, these big projects are fraught with challenges. You know, there are the requirements that we have to meet in terms of the funding that came from D2N2. You know, there were the negotiations with the owner. There were the planning issues that Mike Avery and his team have studiously and methodically steered us through. I think this is a first-class report, and I'm absolutely delighted to see us at the point now where we seem to be onto the final hurdle and the final furlong, and that we're going to see some building on site, hopefully by the early new year. Just a few things, John, I'd emphasise. I thought the points that were made in the consultation about the ambience of the area are absolutely critical. I've said it before, and I know that Joe and Lee have got some good ideas about how we might like the area and make sure that it doesn't just become bland. The building is clearly an impactful, iconic building, but I think it's important that we like that in a way that makes it a welcoming area both during the day and at night time. Like Jenny, I absolutely applaud the elements of sustainable development around the reuse of rainwater and the solar panels. I think is fantastic. I would really urge us and push us, John, and I know we're doing work behind the scenes on this, that whilst public toilet provision runs separately to this project, it needs to run in parallel, because we know that this was also a manifesto commitment, so we need to press around further public toilet provision in Arnold as well alongside this development. And then finally, John, I'd just give credit to the legal team and the finance team. You know, this has been a really difficult time for the council over the last 10 years, facing an unprecedented level of cuts. And I think the risks that have been highlighted up front here in the report, but also the way in which Helen's team and Alison's team have steered us through what could have otherwise been quite tricky situations, given where the economy is at the moment and the difficulty that the economy's in. And we have got to level, you know, Cushman and Wakefield point out that there are risks here in terms of the market, which Councillor Ellis has alluded to in the table. All of that is set out up front in the report and steers us through that. So I commend the recommendations, John. I commend officers. I think they deserve our eternal thanks. And I think this is an absolutely superb demonstration of what local government can achieve. And actually, if we just reflect on the discussions that are taking place today in the news, all the more reasons why decisions like this need to be made at a local level, not drawn up into the central state and made by Whitehall and ministers. Decisions made by local communities and people who are passionate about the town they live in, rather than people who have never left the M25 ring or London. So thanks, John, on behalf of me to all of the officers. I think this is absolutely superb.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. Are there anyone else want to say anything? If there aren't, I'm going to move to the recommendations. I think also, Michael, and the rest of the cabinet, it's showing that we are determined, and we're very determined, because we haven't received the promise of 25 million like many of our colleagues round about, you know, your Ashfields, your Mansfields and your Newark and Sherwoods, who are awash with money compared with Gedling Borough Council. So it also shows how hard our officers have done the work on this to put us in this position now. We need to drive it further, and we need to encourage new business people to come into the town and to use it, or other people to relocate, so we may do something else for the rest of the town. I'm going to move on page 3 there, the recommendations, and it's been outlined by Joe. There are 7 of them. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Leader, can I just make it clear that you're moving the amended recommendations which are on the screen, please? Thank you.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, move it.
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to item, let me just have a look. Item 5. Establish a budget for reopening the High Street. And this is still with you, Joe. We're getting value for money. Value for money out of you. Thank you.
No problem. and actually this is another project that Lee Sycamore's been leading on, so he's been busy since he started in November. So this report seeks cabinet approval for the budget of £105,213 for the reopening of the High Street Safely project, but also to delegate authority to the Service Manager for Economic Growth and Regeneration to implement the associated action plan, which is shown in Appendix A of your pack, subject to any further necessary approvals or consents being obtained to ensure and enable implementation. So this is a much shorter report, you'll probably be pleased to know, but it does detail how councils across England have been awarded a share of £50 million for additional funding to support the safe reopening of our high streets. The funding allows local authorities to put in place various measures and interventions to establish a safe trading environment for customers and businesses, which ties in really nicely with the council's reset strategy and the specific priorities identified in the economic bounce back plan. Under the terms of the funding, money could be claimed back after the 1st of June, so anything spent before then wasn't eligible, and any monies that have been spent need to be claimed back in arrears. The funding should be spent by the end of March, although the funding guidance does encourage the use of that grant towards the end of this year in the run up to the Christmas period, and to address the immediate economic picture that we're in. The funding allocated is to develop an action plan, which, as I say, is included in Appendix A, but to deliver 3 key strands: to provide customer and business communications plan and marketing strategy to make sure that we get the message out there that our high streets are safe, to provide business supports specifically for SMEs, but also for retailers across the board in town and local centres to make sure that they understand and implementing the government advice. Produce and implement various public realm temporary improvements and interventions is the 3rd strand. So in order to understand and to work out what Gedling's action plan should contain, a Reopening High Street Safely Working Group has been established, and this is made up of officers from across the council, including officers from Economic Growth and Regeneration, the wardens, from licensing, from the communications team, environmental health, property, legal, finance. Everybody who needs to be involved has been included within this work. And as part of this initial preparation work, there was a launch programme of events in the first week of those non-essential shops reopening. And this was an opportunity really for us as officers to get out there and to have a visible presence on our high streets, but also to start to understand what the potential issues and things that we needed to consider as part of this funding. So over a period of a week, we undertook COVID-19 compliant events, which essentially meant that officers were present within our high street and local streets, but we didn't invite or encourage any crowds or clusters of people. And so what actually we did with that is we'd written out to all our businesses with a letter to say that we were available to offer support and guidance, to make them aware of the kind of the government's COVID secure guidance. And actually Economic Growth and Regeneration officers visited 500 businesses through that week to actually have face-to-face contact to check what was happening within shops and businesses and to see if we could offer any further advice. Alongside that time, we were supported by the wardens, the neighbourhood wardens, who are also out and helped to review any pedestrian areas or potential pinch points. So areas where people may be clustering, areas of vulnerability, so potentially where there's people, a lot of seating, and again we're very conscious of anti-terrorism measures with that, but also to make sure that there weren't clusters of people, which was obviously against the government guidance at the time. These were all mapped and are clearly identified for each town and local centre, and that's helped form the basis of some of the further work that we've done. Again, supported by other colleagues across the council, so the PASS team undertook a deep clean in each area throughout that week, and that included disinfecting and steam cleaning the public realm over and above the normal cleaning work programme that they had. But of course, that was done at the beginning of the day. So again, part of the work that we've been doing is to try to promote that and market that that kind of cleaning programme. We also had support from environmental health officers, so they were there and available, and they have been throughout this time to offer and provide support and guidance for businesses and premises, to give them the advice on being COVID-19 secure, but also to make sure that if they were looking at adapting their businesses or making changes, that they did that and they were compliant. We were also supported by our neighbourhood policing officers. They'd made a commitment to visit some of our busier town centre, Arnold Town Centre, but also to look at Victoria Retail Park. Since that first week of the launch that we did and the review of the town and local centres, the group have been meeting regularly to monitor the situation. So we now have wardens that go and make sure that they visit the town and local centres to monitor those pinch points and areas of queues and crowdings. And again, that was something that we'd implemented when the pubs reopened and they were out and about and making sure that they patrolling. The past team are carrying on doing their deep cleaning of the various town and local centres, and that's now part of their weekly cleaning routine. And the economic growth and regeneration team are working closely with businesses and retailers to make sure if there's any further issues that crop up, that we're ready and are available to help. All that work has created a situation where we now understand what are the issues in our town and local centres, and the group have started to pull together the action plan. But before we did that, and before I go into the details, I wanted to just make it clear, I guess, about what we felt our priorities were as officers. And this isn't necessarily what the government guidance said. This isn't what the funding said. This is what we felt as officers was right for Gedling. So actually, the funding and the action plan applies to all town and local centres across the borough, and they're detailed in paragraph 1.5. Some councils are only focusing on the main town centres, but we felt we wanted to support all town and local centres. Now, the only caveat I would say to that is the funding can only be spent on public land. So there are a couple of areas where there's private ownership, so that includes Carlton Square and it also includes the Victoria Retail Park. But we have been working with the private owners to try and offer support wherever we can. But as I say, the limitations of the funding do mean that we can't spend the funding on private land. So that was one of our top priorities, is that we're, in terms of the coverage. We also identified really early on that actually, in terms of supporting our businesses, it should be those that are the independent, the small, medium-sized businesses and retailers that actually needed our help more than others. A lot of the chain stores actually had their own plans in place. So one of the things, again, we'd identified is we were trying to promote and prioritise the independent businesses and retailers within our town and local centres. Another thing that we worked through is the idea that actually it's okay to react and to intervene immediately, but actually we wanted to have the opportunity to spread the money, the funding out. So we really felt that there was an opportunity to actually do something else leading up to the Christmas period. We felt that that was really important for our retailers to be able to do something linked to the Christmas kind of shopping period. But also, if there's a potential second wave or further restrictions, that we didn't spend all the funding at once without, and then not have anything to be able to do further works later on. So the idea is that we're doing it across a phased approach. Another key message that I wanted to express today is that actually we really felt it was important to engage with our local businesses, with parish councils, with partners, with key individuals across the town and local centres, because we wanted it to be a situation where they bought into this and they've actually understood what they need to do and work with us, rather than a spoon feeding and telling people what to do. We really wanted to work closely, especially with our local businesses, with the view that then they can take control and they own maybe the interventions and the different things, the things that we're going to implement. So that was something that we spent quite a lot of time, and we're still going to, in terms of actually engaging a lot more with our retailers and businesses than perhaps we've done in the past. And then finally, one of the other priorities that we were really keen is to make sure that we use this funding to actually help support businesses access other grants and other opportunities for funding. So, for example, We're now working on trying to work with all those businesses that haven't applied for the government grant to actually give them almost give them a ring or a visit to say what else can we do to help you. So we felt that that was really important as part of the work that we're doing. And I know I've gone through quite a lot there, but I think that was really important in terms of kind of the way that we've approached this work, because actually that's led to the action plan as part of Appendix A. And as I say, we're seeking delegated authority to be able to implement that, and that will be on a phased process. The priorities have gone through. They're now into the action plan, and they, as I say, are shown in Appendix A. There's 3 main themes within that action plan, and I wanted just to summarise kind of the general themes within each of those areas. So the first theme, as we detailed before, is the idea of a communication plan and marketing of our high streets. Now we have to be very careful here that it's linked to keeping the high street safe, and it's about bringing people back into the high street, but it's linked to the safety issues. So it's not place marketing, and it's not necessarily marketing of the businesses or the retailers. It's about the safety aspect. So working with our communications team, we've now got a Keep It Local campaign, and this is going to be a phased marketing campaign that's designed to encourage people back into their local high streets and to support local businesses, but of course on the basis that it's safe to do so. We're also going to do some further work with our communications team. We've got various ideas in terms of having a visible presence. So the idea of having banners on our lampposts, getting again the Gedling branding out there, but also to make sure that people are clear that we've spent the time and effort to make sure that they're safe in their local centres. The second aspect is business support, and actually this is a real positive, because as part of the existing revenue budgets, we'd already been able to start to appoint a small business advisor, which was to support the economic growth team. But through this funding, we've now been in a position where we've been able to get a second business advisor, but specifically for retail and high street businesses. And they've been appointed already, so that money has been spent and allocated at risk. But again, the pressure was very much on delivering and getting moving. The third kind of potential officer that we're looking at employing as part of this process is an information officer. So this role is to support high street businesses with the change in legislation, signposting them to further advice and guidance if required, but also to be a visible presence on our high street. So similar to what the wardens do, they're very visible, but the idea with the information officer is that they'd be there to be able to offer advice and support to our businesses and retailers. And we're already working with Kevin to look at how that would actually work alongside and coordinate with the wardens. There have been other changes, so we've done a lot of work with our website, make sure that there's a lot of information and support there for people to be able to access. Most of that is signposting, but again, we've really wanted to try and make sure that there's an area for businesses to be able to click onto and to get all the information in one place. The third phase and the third part of the action plan is linked to social distancing measures and public realm temporary improvements and interventions. So, there's a lot being done in terms of in other areas about floor stickers and social distancing posters, and a lot of them said 2 metres. Some of them now changed to say 1 metre plus. But what the work that we're doing with this is trying to make sure that wherever possible and where businesses need the support for floor stickers or for posters, that we can do that and we can help them. This funding actually just gives us a wider scope and to have a coordinated approach and actually have some of that Keep It Local marketing campaign to run through that. We've got various other ideas as detailed in the action plan, including various ideas of reordering and planning for external spaces and activities. So the idea of having a pop-up space or an area for people to wait if they've got an appointment at a certain time and they don't want to queue outside a shop. We're also looking at whether we can maybe reuse some of our vacant market stores and have pop-up markets. we're looking at whether there's scope to actually change some of the traffic regulation orders in Arnold specifically around the precinct because of some of the conflict between pedestrians and parked vehicles. And the other big area, as I said before, is just to try and identify if there's any vulnerable areas or pinch points that actually we can help by intervening. And again, that's if there's crowded areas or if there's areas of seating that we can help. So I know I've rattled through the action plan in quite quickly, but it is all detailed in Appendix A, and officers are seeking approval. As I say, for that to be delegated to the Service Manager for Economic Growth to implement it, subject obviously to the recommendation 1, which is to establish the budget of £105,213 for the delivery of the Reopening High Street Safely project, which is to be funded through the RDF funding, subject to a successful application. What I would say is if there were any extensive changes required to the action plan, officers would come back to Cabinet for with the revised scheme for approval. That's it, Chair.
Thanks, Joe. Another excellent report and a pathway there that's quite clear to see. It's not bad for a little council, is it? And you know, we keep delivering these things, and again reminding people that we don't get the funding that other places get. Does somebody want to make any comments? I don't see any hands on the screen. Yes, Jenny's there. You're muted, Jenny.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Again, thanks to Joe for this short report. Really, rather masks the work that lies underneath it. And I'd like to thank the wardens and everybody else who've supported the economic growth staff team and the finance officers who've supported. It just shows how all the departments working together can really make a substantial difference. I read it and I made sort of 3 main points to me, and I was saying this to Joe yesterday that I think if anything, the pandemic has showed the value of our local shops, local independent shops, because they've been a lifeline to many people. I think I visited a supermarket once, and for the first time last week, I've relied on those small shops to get everything I need. So they've been an absolute godsend, and we really need to make sure that we sustain them. The second thing in the report is giving confidence to people using the shops that it's actually safe to go there, and that there's appropriate measures in place to keep them safe, keep staff safe as well. And also, obviously, the support to businesses to either reopen or remain open. And we know that some of them won't. I'm aware of some businesses that, unfortunately and very sadly, will not reopen again. But the visiting and the contact with businesses that's happened over the last few weeks has been absolutely excellent. And I'm sure it's given people, our shopkeepers and others, they know that somebody is there to talk to, they know they're being supported, and they can ask advice from a named officer or somebody else. So again, fantastic report, really important going forward, that we maintain those local shops and high streets. So thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Next one, Viv. You muted, Viv.
Hi, yeah, thank you. Thanks for the report. I found it really interesting. Joe, I'm really positive about the holistic approach you're taking to the borough as well. So we're looking across the borough. I really welcome the attention also to ensure that premises are safe. Obviously, we've read some nightmare scenarios in one of our, not so far off cities. So I really welcome the fact you've been going to ensure premises are safe, ensuring that, we haven't got any concerns around people's safety in the workplace. So I think that's really, really helpful. I just wondered, in terms of, I know that some business have been struggling, and one of the areas that they've struggled with is to actually have the capital to provide screens in their shops. And I just wondered, is this money, are you able to use this money to support very small businesses that would struggle to get the capital to be able to purchase screens in their shops so they could safely open? There's a question. And the other question, Joe, the other question is that I am a little bit concerned that there is still a mix of people wearing masks and not wearing masks. And I absolutely get it that shops do not want that confrontation, particularly smaller shops with confrontation about that. But I just wondered, in terms of, again, public education, having some masks with you, encouraging people to take a mask, to use the mask, can we utilise money to support people with that as well? Because I do think it's an education. I mean, I go out sometimes and I think, oh goodness me, I've forgotten my mask, I have to go back and get it. So I can see for some people that the mask thing is still an issue, but are we, you know, it would be really good to think that we've got some with us that we can encourage people to wear them rather than get into confrontation with them. So thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
Chair, do you want me to answer the question?
Yeah, and just can you mention something about the sanitisers? I've just written that down. So,
yes.
you know, that we could be placing sanitisers about the place.
So
Thanks.
under the terms of the funding, it's quite clear that any of the money spent needs to be spent on public spaces. And so we can't transfer any of the money to private businesses. And that's businesses generally, and as I said, with the Victoria and Carlton Square, so it has to be spent on public spaces, which also therefore means that we can't buy any PPE or things like hand sanitizer as part of the funding. So the way that we've approached this specific action plan, and of course the action plan was then submitted to the funders, has been to be about educating and the marketing campaign and the idea of staying safe. But actually, why the working group is so important across the council is there are other things that we can be doing. So outside of this funding, one of the ideas is that with the wardens, that they're there to actually help support the retailers. If there are any specific issues, the information officers that will be there as well. And it's about identifying specific areas. So we're already aware that there's areas of clusters. We're already aware of some of the businesses that perhaps aren't as up to speed with some of the measures that there should be. So in terms of the strict answer in terms of for the funding and what you're approving is no, we can't include PPE and we can't include hand sanitizers because we can't secure that with the funding. But we are looking at that as part of, as I say, the cross council, the corporate working group. So that is something that we've already picked up. So yeah, I just got to be clear in terms of the funding of what we can and we can't do, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Michael, hand showing.
Yeah, just a quick question. The action, just on that point, Joe, the action plan refers to socially distanced walkways, etc., on pavements. Obviously, we know that there's a push to encourage, which I commend, cycling, walking. You know, trying to cut down on people using carbon emission vehicles. You know, as we try and build back better, which I think all makes eminent sense. And I think, although it's not fully our responsibility and it's the responsibility of the county council, we need to continue to press that issue, you know, as much as we can as a local council. The action plan refers to sanitising stations, and I said earlier this week to the chief exec that I've seen other examples, including in Sunderland, where they've installed sanitisation hand sanitizer stations in the streets, in the high streets that people can use, that are fitted in, drilled down into the floor, quite slim looking things, don't take up a lot of space, but are encouraging that practice, as Councillor McCrossan says, of getting people into the mindset of washing your hands, sanitising your hands, remembering the mask, etc. So even if we can't use the funding, there is some funding allocated in the action plan for it, I see. You know, can we use the funding for the stations, even if we can't use it for the actual hand sanitising liquid? Because I think we need some. I think we need some in our town centres. I think, as Viv says, we need to be encouraging people to do all they can. If you listen to what the Director of Public Health was saying yesterday from the city and the county, it's incumbent on all of us across the county and the city to do everything we can to make sure that we're not on the receiving end of a second wave like we've seen in other areas.
And it's a new normal, Michael, isn't it? It's the new normal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, get it into habit forming if we're keeping hands clean. Is there anyone else?
Just if I could just add the point on that, because it is, I don't want you to think we're not looking at it. It's just we're just trying to be clear in terms of what the funding can provide. One of the things that we've looked at is actually whether there's an opportunity to support our businesses by having maybe these stations or the idea of contact points within some of our key retailers or independent shops. So we are absolutely looking at it, take on board the comments. We just need to make sure that we do it in the right place. And wherever we can, we want to get people in the shops spending their money. But yeah, we'll look at that as part of the, as I say, the corporate working group. And the point in terms of working with the county on the cycle and other sustainable measures, that's all part of that work that we're doing as well.
Thanks, Joel. I mean, it goes what we said in the first, about all the excellent work that's gone on. I shan't carry on because I see there's a door at the back of you and you won't be able to get out there to go home. So, but thanks. Please pass it on to everyone. It's really appreciated, not just by us, but the people out that are in our borough. So I'm going to move those recommendations, which are on page 11. There are 2 items there, and that's approving the budget and then delegate authority to the service economic manager. I'll move those. Seconded?
Yeah, seconded.
Yeah. Okay, and we agreed. We are agreed.
Agreed.
Yeah. We're going to move over to item 6, which is agenda item 6, and that's the Prudential Code indicated monitoring 2021 quarterly treasury activity and the report for the quarter ended the 30th of June 2020. And I believe that's going to be Alison somewhere.
Yes, thank you, Leader. So yes, this report. Yes, this report presents our usual quarterly monitoring on the actual position in Q1 against our Prudential Code and Treasury indicators that were approved by full council in March. So it's just starting first of all with an update on the economy and interest rates. So this position is broadly the same as I reported last month as part of the outturn report. So I won't dwell too much on the numbers. Just to say that primarily due to COVID and Brexit related uncertainties, the economic forecasts are for a sharp downturn in growth, an increase in the UK's annual budget deficit and an increase in job loss, evidence of which we're starting to see now in the press every day. There is considerable uncertainty as to how far growth will fall and then how quickly the economy might recover to what was previously regarded as normality. The extent of damage done to business, the impact on consumer confidence and behaviours, and the risk of a second wave of the virus, and how soon a vaccine might be available, are all issues which make economic forecasting problematic. The Bank of England has, though, reported this morning a more optimistic outlook, which now projects that growth will not fall as far as previously thought, but will take slightly longer to recover, which they now anticipate to be by the end of next year. They also indicated a slightly more optimistic view of the number of expected job losses, but the level of unemployment is still expected to double to almost 7.5% as the furlough scheme comes to an end. Their forecasts, though, are based on no second wave of the virus and a smooth transition to a new EU free trade agreement at the start of the next year. Of course, all of those do have a lot of uncertainties, and certainly in the news this morning, there were some opposite views to that level of optimism. The Bank of England also confirmed today that it will be holding the base rate at 0.1% and indicated that there'll be no rise until there's clear evidence that a recovery has taken hold. It is expected by our Treasury advisors that it will stay at this level for at least the next 2 years, and some forecasters are even saying that that could be as long as the next 5 years. So turning to our overall Treasury activity during Q1, in paragraph 2.4 of the report, firstly, I can confirm that all of the Treasury activity this quarter has been contained within the approved limits for both the Prudential and Treasury management indicators of affordability and prudence. With regard to investments, as always, the security of money takes priority over yield. And as cash investments rates are now very low and have continued to fall during Q1 in response to COVID and the base rate cuts, our equated investment rate now stands at less than 0.5%. So returns are quite low, but still outperform the benchmark rates in the market. This is helped by the £1 million investment in the property fund, although returns for that are projected to drop by at least 1% this quarter. As reported last month, the CCLA property fund has been suspended due to COVID, but that suspension is expected to be temporary, and as the property fund is viewed as a long-term investment, should not cause undue concern. Whilst investment rates have fallen during the quarter and are expected to remain low, It is currently anticipated that our outturn for interest will be broadly in line with the estimate, which is mainly due to cash balances at the beginning of the year being higher than expected as the government paid cash up front to fund the business grant scheme. But we will be keeping a close eye on that throughout the year. So with regard to borrowing, I can confirm that no new borrowing has been undertaken during Q1. So our borrowing still stands at 9.8 million. Council's current capital programme does assume that we will need to undertake some borrowing this year as our capital financing requirements forecast to increase to 17 million. This is primarily due to the commercial property investment programme, which stands at £5 million for this year. However, as detailed at paragraph 2.8, the Treasury has been consulting local authorities on changes to the PWRB lending terms. Members will recall last year that Treasury imposed an additional margin of 1% on all PWRB rates across the board, and they introduced that with no prior warning. This was done in an attempt to curb the increased demand for borrowing due to the sharp rise in commercial property acquisition that local government was taking part in. Those acquisitions are what the government's now calling debt for yield activity, and which it considers introduces risks both locally and nationally, and exposes taxpayers to a risk that income does not materialise, leaving councils with a commitment to keep loan repayments, which will then have to be funded by the taxpayer. And indeed, some local councils during COVID have started to experience that risk coming to reality. So the main proposals that are in the consultation are that borrowing from PWRB will not be allowed to purchase commercial property if the aim is primarily to generate an income stream. And also that authorities that wish to access any PWRB will have to confirm that they do not have any assets primarily for yield in their programme, regardless of how they propose to fund it, effectively preventing any authority from undertaking any PWRB borrowing in the year that it does include those schemes in its programme. They're also proposing that if a local authority borrowed and is then found to have invested in debt for yield at a later date, that they intend to reserve the right to require loans to be repaid on demand. What the government does then intend to do when it implements the outcome of the consultation is it intends to lower the interest rates on new PWLB loans for service objectives. So that would be a welcome change. It would make all the difference to some of our service-related schemes like the Arnold Market that you've just approved. So the outcome of the consultation will have consequences for the implementation of the Council's commercial property investment strategy, which makes clear that these investments are primarily for return. And it's anticipated the Council would have significant difficulty meeting the definitions of normal service delivery activity that are included in the consultation. Considering the potential impact of this consultation, together with the already increased risks currently prevailing in the property market due to the economic downturn, SLT proposed to put on hold the commercial property investment programme to allow for a full review when the outcome of the consultation is known and a report can be made to a future meeting of Cabinet. So the recommendations, Leader, there on page 25 for members to note the report.
Thanks, Alison. Got any hands showing? Any questions anywhere? No. Michael?
You're on
You're on mute, Michael.
Yeah, thanks, John. Just 2 points I'd make. Thanks to Alison for walking us through the report. I thought the section on the economic update was really interesting. It's not just a few people as economists who are overly optimistic, I think, about the economy. We had a councillor on the last full council meeting who was overly optimistic about the economy as well. I think you ought to read this report, because if you look at the GDP statistics for January prior to the lockdown, it shows that there was a disappointing 0% growth. I don't think that's anything to crow about. And I think when you turn on the radio this morning and you hear thousands of jobs being cut by WH Smith, by Pizza Express, by all those other companies we've seen in the last few weeks coming forward with job losses. I think it's not a time for politicians to be crowing about the economy when people are losing their jobs and their livelihoods. So thanks for Alison to just talking us through the situation in relation to the economy. The other point I'd just make in relation to the Public Works Loans Board consultation is you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't with this Tory government. A few years ago, Secretary of State Eric Pickles was telling us to buy up property to make commercial income to try and cover the 10 years of austerity we've had under this Tory government, where they've taken 60p out of every pound from our funding. Now, all of a sudden, we're being told that we shouldn't be raising income outside of our area, commercial income from commercial assets, and they're going to try and close it down through the consultation. I don't have a strong view either way, but I would wish that the Tory government would make their mind up. It's either privatisation and profiteering to cover for austerity, or it's tying both hands behind your back, cutting your revenue support grant to absolutely nothing and cutting 60p out of every pound for funding and cutting down opportunities for commercialisation. So, you know, which way are councils meant to go on some of this? Let's see what happens. I think the approach that SLT set out about pausing any further investments in commercial property until we see the outcomes of the consultation is a sensible way forward, but it beggars belief, really. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing in government. It seems there's a change of tune every time there's a change of Secretary of State.
That's correct, Michael. Every time it's switched to change of mind. I've got Jenny.
Yeah, thanks, Leader. On 2.8 on the Public Works Loans Board, we're assuming this will be retrospective if they bring in this proposal preventing any authority borrowing if they've got commercial property for yield. Is that right, Alison, or will it just be a new start and for future investments?
They haven't. I don't think it will be retrospective. They haven't said when they plan to introduce it. That's indeed one of the consultation questions. I think some will want it introducing as quickly as possible so as we can take advantage of the lower rates for our normal service objectives, and some will want it to come later. And I think it's probably likely that it will be from next year, but that's really awaiting the outcome of the consultation. I suppose the other thing to note is, whilst it's not retrospective, the if you do have a property investment portfolio which you quite rightly will want to churn to take advantage of the best properties at the time, you've got something now and you want to replace it, you won't be able to replace it in the future. So any programs for commercial property, any portfolios of commercial property will effectively become less and less worthwhile as time goes on.
Yeah. Thanks, Alison.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Can I just ask Alison? I had one of those kindly emails yesterday, I think it was, from my bank telling me they're going to reduce the interest rate again. We have been very good. We have held. This is a great thing in NatWest. We have held everything down. We've done this, that, and the other. So we're going to screw you for a bit more. Yeah. Are there any signs of that on any of our interests? Because I know it's dwindled, but we still rely on some of that.
It's all of the investment rates have come down. To invest with the government at the moment, they're paying 0.001. And the best rates that we're getting are 0.15 on the money market funds, aside from the property funds. Even the 1 year rates, which are few and far between. I think there's one year rate that's sitting at about 0.3. So really, there's nothing for investment. The Bank of England have actually talked potentially about a negative interest rate, but they're not. Which would be interesting, and I've never seen it. But, so effectively they want us to get out spending money. They don't want us saving money.
And at the same time, it goes back to my 25 million promise for different places. They don't seem to want to touch Gedling. Can I ask, and it might be a question you can't answer as an officer, and it may be that I'll put it to the chief exec another time, has the new MP help this council in any help towards the financing? Have we had any avenues opened up to Treasury? Because we can't get into there, so it's up to hopefully the representative in the House of Commons.
I can only answer from my own experience. I've not had any contact with the MP, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that.
Thank you, Michael.
Mute.
Michael, you're on mute. You're on mute. That's it.
Sorry, I don't know why it keeps doing that. I think you make a good point, John, about the Towns Fund. I mean, I wrote to the Secretary of State last year and to the local MP about why, both in terms of the Future High Streets Fund and the Towns Fund, we'd been overlooked, which, of course, at the time we had big suspicion, and I stated in the letter to the Secretary of State, we had a big suspicion that there was some sort of electioneering that may sit behind the choices by ministers. The whole process was shrouded in secrecy. There was no application process, no clear criteria for at least one of those funds. It was well over 3 billion in total, I think, wasn't it? Monies in terms of that Towns Fund and Future High Streets Fund. And I think what's really interesting, John, about the point you make is the National Audit Office have now done a review of that fund, and their conclusion was the advice of civil servants was that money should have gone to areas in need.
Correct.
And government ministers, that is Conservative ministers, decided we're not going to listen to civil servants. We're going to give it to the top marginal seats in the election to try and win them for the Conservatives. And that's the National Audit Office speaking. That's not me as a Labour councillor speaking. Now, if that's not gerrymandering and inappropriate use of public funds, I don't know what is. And I think, quite frankly, the response we got back from the Secretary of State and the local MP was a slap in the face to our communities. Why is Gedling being treated any different to Newark, or, as you said, John, to Ashfield, or to some of those other areas around the country? Our hard-working taxpayers pay their tax, and they just want a fair deal. And I think it's about time our local Member of Parliament and the government started to listen to people in Gedling and recognise that we've got some decent, hard-working people here, and we deserve a fair crack of the whip.
Agreed. We had a high-profile MP. Now we've got a ghost. I'm going to move on before it gets really tasty and move on to the recommendations, which are on page 25. I'm going to move those recommendations. There's one there. The members note this report. Are we agreed?
Yes,
yeah. Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on a little bit now to item, where are we? 7, I think it is. Again, is that you again, Alison?
Yes, that's me again.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yes, this was the Q1 budget monitoring report presenting the estimated position as at the end of Q1 2020. So starting with the revenue budget on page 46. Ordinarily, Q1 budget monitoring is a relatively quiet period with not too much to report, but unsurprisingly, this year we're in a very different position with COVID-19 having a major impact on our finances. As summarised in the table on page 46, the 2021 budget is projected to be overspent by £420,000 against an approved budget of 11.6 million. The full budget implications of COVID-19 are detailed in the tables at paragraph 2.2.2. These detail both the expenditure pressures and the income losses, which total almost 3.3 million in 2021. It should be noted that a further £89,000 of expenditure, including the food hub and PPE, are not included in this total, as some spend was partly in the old year and some was accommodated within approved budgets, but they are rightly need added into these totals. In addition, and included in the summary table on page 50, is an estimate of collection fund losses. So that's our collection of council tax and business rates, which won't impact on the budget until 21-22. So that estimate of our unrecoverable tax losses about 280,000. So that brings us to a total budget impact in the region of 3.6 million related to COVID-19. Also included in the table on page 60 is an estimate of the emergency grant funding at 2.8 million. So this includes 1.4 million that we've already received from government, plus an estimated 1.4 million from the recently announced income guarantee scheme, which will compensate in part for some of our unforeseen losses of sales fees and charges that are irrecoverable. After accounting for a 5% deductible, a grant of 75p in the pound will be available, but it does exclude commercial income, and it's only for sales fees and charges. We are waiting for the final details of that scheme, but the government have confirmed that this grant is in addition to the funding that we've already received, which can now be available to fund all of the crashes. So the net COVID-19 related budget impact is just over 700,000. And of that, the net deficit, including the current monitoring report for the current financial year, is £429,000. Of course, it's not all about COVID. Other major variances to note are the pay award, which is expected to be 0.75% above the estimated 2% pay award. And that equates to £102,000 impact per annum. And the update of the efficiency programme is also included at paragraph 2.3. The total projected deferral on the 2021 efficiency programme is a slippage of £256,000. £169,000 of that is related to COVID and is included in the COVID tables in the report for completeness. And a further £87,000, which is not COVID related. And this is partly offset by the full application of what we have in our budget reduction risk provision for the year of £100,000. So we've applied all of that. So as I've already said, just bringing together everything, the 2021 budget is projected to be overspent by £420,000. And it's proposed in the report that Cabinet now approved a transfer from earmarked reserves, as detailed in the report, to maintain a balanced budget. These reserves have been reviewed, and I can confirm that they are available for application. There are no commitments to spend against these, and SLT reviewed these earlier on in the year as we were looking at the medium-term plan impact. Of course, it is important to stress that there is a significant amount of uncertainty around the full impact of COVID-19. These are our best estimates based on current information, and they could move up or down. Particularly around income, where there are uncertainties both around the capacity of our services and the demand for them for our chargeable services. The impact of COVID-19 will continue to be closely monitored throughout the year, and we'll look to mitigate that projected deficit in other ways. And the impact of that use of reserves on the forward budget will be reviewed as part of the budget process and as part of a review of the medium-term plan. So that's the main picture for revenue. In terms of the capital programme, which is not sure quite what page it's on, but there are actually no amendments for Q1. Yeah. So Leader, the recommendations are set out there on page 45.
Thank you, Alison. I can see Michael's waving on the screen there.
Yeah, John, thanks to Alison and the finance team for working flat out basically over this period, not only to make sure that the council's been able to keep afloat, but also that we've been able to support the most vulnerable people, as well as the work Alison's been doing on actually steering the council's budget through. Alison's been doing a huge amount of work about, around the support we've done around the council tax reduction scheme for hardworking families around the borough. I just make this point in analysis, John. I can remember a time when you and I stood in the chamber back in 2011 and we were told by an opposition councillor that we'd max out the credit card as a Labour administration when we took control of the council. And actually, far from it, what you can see here illustrated in 2.1 in this report is that if it weren't for the prudence of this Labour administration, and it weren't for the fact that we'd set aside earmarked reserves for the leisure strategy, for the transformation reserve, and for the efficiency and innovation reserve, totaling a use of £420,600 to cushion the impact now, the council would have been in dire financial straits as a result of the situation that this government has left us in. So, that drawing down of reserves, £420,000 of reserves made up of 237 from the leisure strategy reserve, £100,000 from the efficiency and innovation reserve, and 83,600 from the transformation reserve, is money that we've put away while the sun was shining. And now the roof's been smashed, yes, by COVID, but also by austerity by this Tory government. And we're having to raid that money that we put aside to invest in public services for the residents and businesses in our area. And if it weren't for that cushion that this Labour administration, assisted very ably by Alison and her finance team, had built up, we would have been we'd have been up the creek without a paddle, John, for want of a better phrase. So I think Alison and her team deserve huge credit.
Yes.
I think it proves, John, that in spite of austerity and in spite of the naysayers, this Labour administration has not maxed out the credit card at all. It's put away money for situations like this, and hopefully we will be able to steer a course through choppy waters, because as Alison says, this is by no means over, and we don't quite yet know what the impact is going to be. Hopefully it's a slightly rosier picture than the one that we see at the moment. But if it isn't, at least we've got a little bit of a cushion there to try and help us along the way.
Thank you, Michael. I agree totally with that.
It's
casting back to my grandma's days of when she got one pot for this, one pot for that, and that's how you were brought up. You know, you didn't overspend, and in effect, this is for our rainy days. But it's absolute prudent handling of the budgets that's allowing us to do this, because there's a lot of councils appealing, and a lot of those councils are Conservative councils in the south that have overspent, overcommitted, and can't cover themselves. So again, adding my thanks to Alison and the team, because it is hard work, and we're like the little children. I think, Alison, we're always asking for stuff, and you slap us down every now and then and say no, you can't have it. You know, you'll have to wait. Yeah. So we, you know, it can get a bit feisty sometimes, but you know, we've all got the same end, and that is to serve our people properly. Is there anybody else showing a hand? I can't see any on there. So move a recommendation on page 45. There's two recommendations: approve the general fund budget, and the other one, note the use of the reserves, which has been thoroughly explained. And please pass on our thanks, Alison, to all the team who tap all the calculators, add it up in the heads, or use the abacus.
Let's hope we don't do it in the heads.
Yeah. Okay.
Second that, John.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Approved.
Moving over to Gedling Plan now, I think, somewhere, when I find it. Yes, we are. Gedling Plan quarter 2021. Who's going to do that? This
is Helen, Leader.
Helen.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I
can't see you. Where are you, Helen?
I've just switched my camera on, Leader, so hopefully you can see me.
There we are. Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Leader. So first, apologies to those of you accessing your agendas online. Unfortunately, we had a technical issue when the agenda pack was published, and the appendix appears before the report in the electronic pack. But for those of you with a paper copy, the document should appear in the right order. The Leader, as you can imagine, in the same way as Alison explained the impact of COVID-19 on the Q1 budget situation, you'll appreciate that Q1 performance has also been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. What I will point out is that this report covers the first 3 months of the new 3-year Gedling Plan, and the Chief Exec, Mike Hill, will present the report of the review of that Gedling Plan in a minute. But just to hold on to the fact that we're just talking about the first 3 months of that full 3-year plan. So at this stage, of the 96 actions in the plan, 1 has already been completed, and the rest are either in progress, so they've already been started, or they've been assigned to an officer. So it may well be that they weren't intended to have been started during Q1, but we understand who the officer is who's going to lead on progress. So, as I've said, the next report on the agenda sets out the review of the Gedling Plan, and members will be aware that it's clear at this stage 2 actions which were due to be started and completed in year 1 are unlikely to be achieved, and there will be slippage in year 2. So I'm not going to cover that. That will come in the next report that Michael will take you through. So just reflecting back on Q1, despite the impact of COVID-19, I think it's fair to say, and SLT has concluded, that performance at the end of that quarter has been strong. And we need to read this report that's before you today against the backdrop of the significant amount of activity the council has carried out in response to the pandemic. So full details of our response were provided in June. So you will recall the report that came into Cabinet in June that David Wakelin presented, which explained the significant activity that the council has achieved in response to the COVID pandemic. And of course, that was completely unplanned at the time that we were putting our Gedling plan together. So out of the 32 indicators that are in the plan, 8 were on or above target at the end of Q1, 6 were slightly below target, and 12 indicators missed their target. And you'll see that 5 indicators are for tracking purposes only. And I'll just point out that in view of the fact that the Civic Centre has been closed during Q1, other than for emergency appointments, and we've actually not needed to conduct a face-to-face emergency appointment during that period. There is no data available for the indicator that relates to percentage of customers seen within 15 minutes. Obviously, you'll appreciate that because we've not seen any customers during that period, we're unable to provide a percentage. So we're not able to report, we have no data for that particular performance indicator. The report itself sets out particularly positive performance, and I won't go through that, Leader. I'll assume that members of the Cabinet have already read the report in detail, but I'd like to just highlight a couple of examples for you. So the percentage of calls answered by customer services is absolutely excellent when you consider that they have answered 8,500 additional telephone calls in the first 8 weeks of lockdown. So this is on top of the usual calls that they handle. And you'll appreciate that they are handling those calls in very, very different circumstances that they would normally do. I also want to draw your attention to the performance of our welfare support team, which I think has been first rate. And you'll see in the report that the housing benefit indicators are slightly behind target. But when you consider the significant increase in caseload that the officers in that team have had to deal with during Q1, I think whilst they've just missed target, their performance is incredibly positive, and I would not see that as obviously a negative performance given the fact that they have just slightly missed target. So paragraph 2.7 outlines the performance indicators which missed target at the end of Q1, and you'll appreciate that a number of showing 0 or have been significantly affected as a direct result of the impact of COVID-19. And I think this is not to be regarded as poor performance, and senior leadership team are not raising any significant performance with you today. As usual, the appendix sets out achievements delivered in Q1, and they are wide-ranging. And you'll see at this time progress against the reset strategy has also been included. So you'll remember when we brought in a report relating to the reset strategy, we indicated that we will make sure that Cabinet is updated on progress. So you'll see that there is achievements against the reset strategy already. And I don't intend to go through that appendix again. I will assume that members have read it, but I will draw your attention to a couple of examples that have been included in paragraph 2.8 of the cover report. Leader, the recommendation is on page 81 of your agenda pack. The report is here for Cabinet to note, but I'm happy to take any questions that members of Cabinet might have.
Thanks, Helen. I'm looking for hands waving. Michael?
Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks to Helen and colleagues for compiling this detailed report. I did just want to spend a moment because I think it's, otherwise these things get just cast over. I did just want to spend a moment to thank the customer services team, particularly throughout the situation with coronavirus. That figure of 98.6% of calls to the contact centre being answered or a call back made being against the target of 94% is remarkable. It's touching on 100% at a time where there's been a significant increase in people ringing up the council asking for assistance and support. It's a positive, I think, for me that we see 2,000 more people on the Keep Me Posted emails, John, because it's another way of keeping people updated about what's going on. And I think Mike Avery and his team in planning, you think about the journey we've been on in planning and the frustrations that used to exist for elected members and communities and applicants. Some of those figures there, 100% of major planning applications processed within 13 weeks against a target of 90%, 96% of minor, over 96%, 96.3% of minor planning applications processed within 8 weeks against a target and 92% of other planning applications processed within an 8-week target, against the target of 85%. It's a remarkable journey, I think, that Mike Avery and his team have taken us on, and I think the planning team deserve, huge amount of credit for that. And then, Councillor Ellis's teams there in environmental health, 97% of our food premises scoring 4 or 5 in the National Food Hygiene Rating Scheme against a target of 90%, steered and supported by Sam Palmer and his team, all at a time where we've gone through a really difficult period for the council. And I think that colleagues deserve credit. Particular mention, John, for our housing team. I mean, looking at those figures there, to be only 0.3 days, 0.3 of a day over the target in terms of average time to process a housing benefit claim, target being 13 days and the performance actually being 13.3 days, at the same time that they've received an 82% increase throughout coronavirus in their claims, I just think is absolutely remarkable. And some of the personal work, John, that we've all seen as cabinet members and councillors firsthand that the housing team have done to support people in the most dire situations without a roof over their head, I think is superb. We've got such compassionate staff in that department who work really, really hard, often in very complex situations. And Henry's often there as a lead member assisting, and I know the councillors have pressed things. And just the final point, 2 points I'd make, John, are nice to see a slight increase in recycling. Yes, it may be down to the fact that people have been at home more and in lockdown, but there is a slight uptick there in recycling, and that has to be welcomed. Although obviously concern around the amount of household waste that's being produced, but we know why that's happened because of the lockdown situation. And then the last point, John, not a negative, but just to highlight, and Councillor Hollingsworth and I were talking about this just the other evening on the telephone, the issue around affordable housing. The explanation's very clear about why we hadn't seen any affordable housing, and we have now got some coming forward, in the next few weeks and months. But I think this just underscores the imperative, John, of the commitment we've got as an administration for building our own council housing, building our own homes, and doing everything we can to try and assist those people who need to get on the housing ladder and need support in terms of a roof over their head, John. But overall, I think it's a very good report. I think Helen's very carefully talked us through the reason why there are those issues around missed targets, largely because of coronavirus, one or two others with clear explanations. It's a good report, John, and I think the staff have done a very, very good job, even in spite of the difficult headwinds we've had in terms of the public health crisis.
Thank you, Michael. I can echo that. You see it right the way through, and I'm looking at some of the grants that were handed out, to Ravenshead, to Netherfield, to Shareware, and all those people like that. This is money that's been, I can reassure people, it is well used. There's no doubt in that. We're clearly that these people who, when we give them this thing, it's not just a gift, it's the fact they make it work, but it's also the resilience of the staff we've got that keep way beyond their remit. They're working to try and accommodate people, and I think in the homeless side and the housing needs, etc., there's been some excellent work done there, and I think at the moment we've not actually put anybody on the streets. I think most of them have been accommodated in either an apartment type of thing or a hotel or something, so which we've again complied with the government, but we haven't had a great deal of massive backup in other ways that would allow us to do other things. I'm just seeing it's Vev's waving, yeah. Vev.
Hi, yeah. Echo what everyone said. Very, very difficult times. I hear what you're saying, Michael, also about waste. Again, I can't praise the council enough for the good work they've done in trying to keep the streets clean, the parks clean, collecting our waste. A really difficult time. We had the issue around glass and bottles, but we sorted it in the end. So I just think, exemplary how well we've done on waste. And just as a positive, I went to Gedling Country Park the other day, and just to say, in the mix of all this, we've managed to put some fantastic platforms up, which are brilliant in terms of viewing across the park. And, well done. It's a difficult time. It started in February, and you continued and you completed the work. And I think that's, again, shows how well we're doing as a council in very, very difficult times. In terms, I mean, I suppose it's sort of a touch. We've done brilliantly in terms of supporting to make sure nobody is on the streets. The concern going forward clearly is government's commitment to ensure that nobody returns to the streets. And the concern, you know, for our borough, what are we going to do with people that we are housing? We really do not want to be turfing them out on the streets. I've just been overwhelmed with news stories of the difference it's made to people having a decent place to live in. And I mean, unbelievable. People that have been heavy on drugs, that are coming off drugs. I could just, you know, the conditions that they're living in now and how they are they can't believe what's happening to them and what a difference it's made just looking at them. So, you know, that does concern me in terms of what on earth is the government going to do to support us to make sure we are not putting people back on the streets. Thank you.
Thank you. Henry, do you want to say anything? Henry?
I've got my hand up.
Sorry. Sorry,
Yeah.
I've got my hand
Yeah,
up.
I just
can't get rid of
Let
it.
Henry go.
Jenny. There you are. Jenny first, then Henry.
I'd just like to say a massive thanks to the Housing Needs team. They've been under huge pressure during this time. They've had a huge amount of work to do, a huge amount of case work to do as well. And they've worked absolutely exemplary. I'd also like to say a massive thank you to the Leisure Services team as well, because they actually did quite a lot of calling from one of the leisure centres to vulnerable residents in and around the borough. So they did a sterling job in trying to ensure that vulnerable people had the access to the services that they needed during a particularly really, really difficult time. So I'd just like to thank everybody within those teams for the sterling work they've done over this time.
Yeah.
I do have concerns moving forward in terms of the support for homeless people, particularly if the government changes its policies around supporting getting people off the streets. So I do have concerns about that. The other thing we need to be looking at moving forward is trying to increase the amount of affordable social housing moving forward. And I know there's quite a lot of work being done behind the scenes to look at increasing the amount of properties we have for rent. So I look forward to progress in that area as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Henry. Jenny?
Yeah, just to follow up on the staff resilience, I think it's been quite remarkable the way staff have not allowed themselves to be distracted. At the end of the day, they're mainly residents, I guess, in the borough. They've had their own concerns. They're parents. They have carers. They've had their own worries, apart from dealing with what they deal with at work. So I think it's been quite remarkable, and the way people have been willing to be redeployed to areas of stress. I just want to pick up on the planning side, because you look at the number of major applications, which is at 100%, rather gives the lie to Mr. Jenrick, who says it takes 5 years for many major housing applications to go through. The national average is actually 89%. We're on 100. So what he's saying is absolutely not true. And we know there are many extant planning permissions that have just not been followed through. The answer is not to just throw the planning rules out of the window and take away local democracy. I think that's probably it. I don't want to repeat what other people have said. So yeah. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Jenny. I'll bring you in a minute, Peter. It's interesting that, because the piece about planning, we've got to really look at, see how it does affect us, because there are, I am told, and you'll know, there are 2,000 plus permissions already granted in Gedling. There are 2.5 million. And yet I felt today when I saw the minister, it was indicating we hadn't done our job properly. Well, there's 2.5 million across the country and people haven't taken it up. So I suggest we back that ball back into the developers. Peter?
Yeah, I just want to agree with what everybody else did. I think we've probably got the best local government staff in England. Everybody works tremendously hard for this borough. They have a commitment to Gedling Borough, and I think we should appreciate that, which I'm sure most members do. They think the world of Gedling Borough Council, and they pull the finger out every time. So I think we need to congratulate them. I know we do it regularly, but they have worked tremendously hard this last 14 to 15 weeks, and I think we should really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. Helen, do you want to come back on anything?
No, thank you, Leader.
No. Okay. Well, I haven't got page 81, so can you read the recommendation out?
Yes, Leader. The recommendation is just for Cabinet to note the report.
Yeah, I thought it might be. It's probably got mixed up in some of the others. So seconded.
Yes, seconded.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, great.
Okay, so we're moving over. We're still on the Gedling plan, and we're still, I think, with Helen. That's agenda item 9.
This is me, Leader.
Oh, it's the boss.
It's mine.
Where is it?
It is. Yes. Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. 2 hours into the meeting, but there we go. So, very quick report, this one. So if you remember back in June, Cabinet approved a reset strategy, and as part of that, it was agreed that the Gedling plan priorities and actions be reviewed in the light of the consequences of COVID-19. As you're aware, the Gedling plan 2020 to 2023 sets out a 3-year action plan, and many of the actions contained within it run through the whole span of that 3-year period, some starting in, or most of them in fact starting in year 1. I was quite nervous looking at this report in the fact I thought there'd be a massive impact of COVID, but I'm really pleased that having reviewed, all of the actions, there's 90 something actions in the plan, that only 2 we've found have been affected. And they are just things that, they're set out in the report, and they were things that were originally planned to start around now. And because of COVID, for example, closure of the building, closure of the schools for the design of the reception area, and closure of the leisure centres and the impact that has had on the income, they have had to be delayed somewhat. And, this is not to say they are cancelled and won't be addressed, but they have just been pushed back a few weeks, months, or whatever, and will be reviewed at a later date. Also, there was a few other actions there as regard to public events, and of course, because of the situation, we've had to cancel those as well. Again, totally out of our control. Things like the play days, children's events, and of course the Arnold Carnival. Also, the report details 7 performance indicators that again have been affected by COVID. I think 5 of which are just in relation to attendees at the leisure centres. And again, we've changed these to tracker indicators only for the current year only, because we've got, until we start to recover from COVID, we've got no real idea. We've got ambitions, but no real idea of what the custom and uptake will be by the end of the year. So I think the report sets out those 2 actions and the 7 indicators in detail. So I'll hold it there, Chair, and take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions? Yes, Viv? Viv, you're muted. Henry?
Hello. Yeah, I'd just like to say that given the information I'm getting back from the general public, I'm really confident that we can recuperate the numbers attending our leisure centres and the Bonington Theatre, because people are really keen to get back into the gyms and get back into the things that they used to do. And I think I'm confident moving forward that post-COVID that we can recuperate those numbers and also the income as well. So sorry, Viv's back now. So just wanted to say that I've had some very positive feedback from residents about what we've done in terms of preparations for opening our leisure centres, and from people who've actually been to the Bonington Theatre and the cinema. Yeah. They've had a really positive experience there as well from when it opened. So yeah, by and large, very positive feedback from residents. After we opened up our facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Viv. We've got you.
I don't know what happened then.
Where did you go?
I went into some lounge room, I think, on the on Microsoft Teams. But anyway, yeah, just to echo Henry, I went to the Bonington. It was cabaret style evening. Really enjoyed it, actually. Well organised, and yeah, great. So I would encourage people to use the Boddington. And just to say, Mike, I mean, clearly, obviously, the disappointment about some of the schools the youth programme that we're trying to run. That we have got some activities going on. Notts Forest has
Nottingham Forest, you'll get shot. Nottingham
Forest. Nottingham Forest are doing quite a great programme for us, and in fact, had feedback that they delivered in Calverton the other day. 35 young people turned up. So actually, we have got some, and we've got an arts project online is also going on. So, I mean, disappointing as it is, I'm really keen that we can try and be as creative as we possibly can to try and get other things going, and certainly be planning for the autumn and winter time, which we know is going to be difficult, but to think about how we can, do as much as we can, obviously being safe, but doing as much as we can. So, yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Viv. I think that's a good point about Nottingham Forest and there's Notts County and Mansfield. They've all got community. I think most of the teams have got those now. But it's not just a case of a few months and play football and all the things you hear there. They do such a tremendous amount, not just with sport, but also the social side of it and community side of it. So anyone else? Have I missed anybody? No. Michael, yeah, you've dropped to the bottom of the screen. That's it. Yeah, you're there. You're muted.
Just the overall point to make, John, about the plan that, as Mike says, we've managed to carry on with, as Viv says, a lot of the stuff that's in the plan, even in spite of COVID-19. And I know in the background, John, you've continued, with your campaign that you've been pushing for the last 8 odd years on the trying to get the Fourth Trent crossing, over the River Trent. And that's something you've been working so hard on, John, for 7 or 8 years there, and is right there in the Gedling plan. The vision for the future. It's right there up front. We want to see improved transport connectivity, and it's vital to the borough as we aspire to see an extension of the Nottingham tram into Gedling and a 4th road crossing built across the River Trent. And we're going to carry on pushing that campaign, John. And I do hear that we have got some other people now belatedly joining the party, which would be good to have them involved in the campaign. So sure, we'll hear more on that in the future. But there's lots more other than the things that we're directly responsible for that this council will continue to press for to try and get a good deal for our borough.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, and a good tip off there on the Fourth Trent crossing, which obviously we'll revisit. People think we're asleep with it, but we're not. And Mike, I went with Mike to look at the Carlton Forum. I've also the same with the Arnold Leisure Centre, and the same with the Richard Herod. A lot of work put in by the staff. There's no doubt in that. And listening to people coming in the other day, they were more than pleased last Friday afternoon coming into the gym there. It looked a bit sweaty there, especially Friday afternoon. And Mike and I, we didn't get involved with that, did we, Mike? But it certainly the way it's spaced out and the way if people go, you can feel safe. And that was the people, and the people I've spoken to since, is they feel safe, they feel it's clean, and they'll be returning. So, and it's difficult if you think that people like DW went under yesterday, and people like that who've got far more money to spend on things. They've gone, and we're still there, and we're there to plug that gap. There's no doubt in that. If there's I don't see any more comments. There are three recommendations there. Review of the Gedling plan, and that's my phone going. You'll have to wait a minute. The amendments to actions set out in the report be approved, and the amendments to performance indicators as set out in Appendix 1 be approved. I'll move those.
Seconded.
We agreed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed.
Moving on. I don't know why that keeps doing that. We're on to item 10, which is Director of Organisation, and that's Helen again. Where is she? Helen.
Hello, Leader.
There you are. I've lost you off the screen now.
I've switched my camera on again, so hopefully you can.
Yeah, we're there. We're there. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Leader. I'm pleased to present the Senior Information Risk Owner Annual Report to Cabinet. This is the second annual report that you've seen since I was designated as, we call it CIRO, so Senior Information Risk Owner. While I have oversight of information governance, I am supported, as you'll appreciate, by a number of officers in legal and ICT in the delivery of activity, and they've also contributed to this, what I consider to be a very comprehensive report. In particular, I want to put on record my thanks to Francesca Wiley and Craig Alcock in legal, and Rosie Caddy, Gary Bennett and John Staniland in ICT, and all of those worked tirelessly to make sure that we are complying with relevant legislation. And from a cybersecurity perspective, the council is secure as it can be. So you'll see that the purpose of my report is to provide a summary of information governance activity across the council during the last financial year in order to provide assurance that information risks are being actively managed. So the report sets out in detail what's meant by information governance, and I suppose simplistically for me there are two key elements. So on the one hand, it's about compliance with Freedom of Information Act, Environmental Information Regulations and GDPR and Data Protection Act. And on the other hand, it covers cyber security. So I'll assume that Cabinet members have read the detailed report that's attached to the cover report. I don't intend to go through it in detail, but would like to just highlight a few points. So in terms of number of information requests received last year, there was a decrease on the numbers received the previous year, and this is the first time we've seen a reduction. So when the Freedom of Information Act and EIR came in originally, what we saw was a sharp increase in requests over a number of years. So it's quite interesting to see that they started to plateau, but actually we've seen a decrease last year. 2 complaints were made to the Information Commissioner's Office, but again, I'm pleased to say that she was happy with the council's actions and no action was taken against the council. A number of minor breaches have been reported, but you'll see from the detailed reports that these are largely as a result of clerical or human error. And whilst, of course, we wouldn't want to see any data breach incidents, it's important that we have a healthy culture which supports breach reporting, and I feel that we do have this culture at Gedling Borough Council, and this is important because it ensures that we can act quickly to mitigate any impact of any breach and put in place measures to prevent the issues happening again. It also means that we are in a position to comply with our statutory obligation to report breaches to the ICO within 72 hours. So for me, that's a real strength of this organisation. I'm also confident that the processes we have in place for dealing with data breaches is robust. And again, you'll see from the report that it isn't just a case of ticking a box. Every single incident is thoroughly investigated by either the data protection officer or the deputy, and wherever necessary, remedial measures are put in place to reduce the risk of further incident. And to maintain corporate oversight, all incidents are reported into the data security group, and now senior leadership team routinely see the minutes of the data security group and are also made aware. And I'm pleased to report that there are no systemic failures identified as far as those breaches. These are very much clerical or human errors, sort of very low-level incidents. We're also subject to 2 cyber incidents last year, which members will be aware of, and the details of which are set out in paragraphs 6.4 and 6.5. I don't intend to go through those in detail, but again, I'm pleased to report that these were not successful and no information was accessed or lost. So you'll appreciate that protecting the council from a successful cyber attack is a significant challenge for the council. We continue to be subject to a large number of attempted phishing attacks, which fortunately so far have been stopped, and that's by a combination of technical controls we have in place and staff vigilance. And also I'd point out member vigilance as well. I think that members' understanding of potential phishing attacks and reporting those into ICT very, very quickly. So again, they can act as very much improved, I feel, over the last 12 months. There's always more that we can do, and I cannot guarantee that a cyber attack will not be successful in the future, and I'm sure you wouldn't expect me to. But what I would say is that we are continuing to make continuous improvements in the council's position. So the report sets out what we achieved last year and what we are intending to do this year. Again, I won't go through that. I will assume that members have had a look at that. So my conclusion, as CIRO, is that we have good processes and arrangements in place, but we can't stand still. We must continue to evolve, and we must treat information governance and cybersecurity as our priority. And over the last year, I think we've worked really hard to ensure that senior leadership team has corporate oversight and engagement. And for me, I feel that that has very much improved. I feel that there's very much better understanding from my SLT colleagues about cybersecurity particularly. we understand as a collective the challenges and the solutions at that strategic level. And what I would say is that you'll appreciate this is an incredibly technical area that I am not familiar with, and I thank my SLT colleagues for bearing with us in trying to explain those very technical issues. But I do feel that we've made some improvements in that corporate oversight. Finally, you will recall that last year I flagged up the growing pressure and demand on ICT, and I was extremely pleased to see that full council in March agreed some additional resource as part of the budget setting process this year, and that will very much relieve some of the pressure. Unfortunately, you'll appreciate that recruitment has been delayed due to COVID-19, but that is now moving forward, and we hope to progress that very, very soon. So, Leader, that's all I want to say. The recommendation is on page 99, and that is to note the CSIRO report. But again, I'm happy to take any questions that
Thanks, Helen. You've gone off. Does anyone wish to comment? Jenny's got a hand showing. You're muted, Jenny. Muted.
Sorry.
That's it.
Just thank Helen for the report. It's clearly a very efficient service that you're offering here. I think you ought to perhaps give some advice to Liam Fox. I think he might need it. The other thing is, what the devil was a swivel token, please?
A what?
A swivel token.
If I can explain, it was the small tokens that we used to have that you'd press the button, it would give you a random.
Got you. I never knew they were called that, Helen. Thank you very much.
We called them dongles.
Dongles. I thought they were really old-fashioned then. But, never mind. Shows what I know. Anybody else? We used to use pigeons and stuff like that for communication, and semaphore off the top hill somewhere in Derbyshire. You know, right? Put the tea on, mother. Right, Michael.
We've lost him.
Yeah, I'm here, John.
Yeah.
Just to thank Helen and the team that sits behind Helen, that works with Helen on this important area. I mean, Helen takes this role very seriously, and actually I think it is an area that does need to be taken very seriously. If you see some of the repeated attacks, not only on local authorities, but on central government in terms of cyber security, either automated, attacks, or actually sometimes, as we've seen in recent years, state-sponsored, attacks, or individuals just trying to disrupt a service or make financial gain out of it, or obtain obviously confidential information, which the council is dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and has processes in place to do that in a way that is compliant. I think the 2 points I'd just sort of touch on, which I think Helen and SLT, but also specifically ICT and some of the legal team deserve credit for, is I think it's very clear from this year's report that there is greater corporate responsibility and ownership for the issue around cyber risk. And I think that shouldn't be understated. Actually, I think that's a really significant point, that it's now not just seen as one or two people's job, or people who functionally sit in an area that you would align to cyber risk, particularly around ICT, but actually there's some corporate ownership. And I think, as Helen says, we shouldn't, John, understate the point around members also being aware of this. I know, John, you reported an incident earlier in the year as soon as you'd spotted it, and there was a due process followed, and and a positive outcome there that protected other people from being affected in terms of their emails. And the other thing I'd just say, John, that ICT deserve particular praise here, because I think the quality of data and information and analysis that they're providing back to SLT in terms of the stresses and strains on that service, of managing the risks, but also trying to be the back engine of the council, has been, I think, a stepped up a gear, actually. And I think they've been encouraged to do that, and I think they've done that really well. And the best way you can illustrate that, John, is the positive budget outcome that we saw in terms of the ask for additional resources from ICT last year, which obviously then flowed through. And we know that ICT have played a critical role in trying to help the council through a period where people are having to be work from home and are using kit like we're using now, and doing that in a secure way. So it might seem like a dry report and a turgid report, but actually it's a hugely significant one. And I think Helen and the wider team that work in this area deserve credit, because it's something that potentially, if it goes wrong, could have catastrophic consequences, not only for the council, but for our residents who we serve, John.
Yeah, and if somebody could hack into our systems, then it's untold damage. And I suppose if there were civil actions against us, if we got it wrong, they could be very, very expensive. So, no, I agree with you, Michael, and I agree with Helen and others. There's some excellent work going off down there. I'd also congratulate them on this, because now we're on 9 pictures. We're doing great. But having sit on that many things, I think it was 25 hours I spent on Teams last week, that ours seems to be. It's clear, it's efficient. There's no, crackles, or very few crackles on it. And I think they've done well, all in all, but it is, I don't know, it's a bit worrying about, I was thinking the other day about there's people being encouraged to use more and more IT, and I suppose we do ourselves, like paying of rates and things like that. But I do worry for the people that aren't up to it. When I saw there was a couple, it wasn't particularly to do with IT, but on Mapley Top, 2 people were robbed the other day because they were struggling with it. And one lady lost £500. One thief managed to get £500. Then another one, 350, went across to the co-op and used the hole in the wall there. And it's very frustrating because they were struggling with that IT. And I don't know, wherever we can make it simple and helpful. But I think they certainly do. As a member, I'm very satisfied with what I'm given. Anyone else? Are there any hands? Can't see any hands. So there is a recommendation on page 99 to note. I'll move that.
Seconded.
And we're agreed, are we? We're moving on
Agreed.
to where are we? On to forward plan now. So who's going to, anybody?
It's just for noting, leader. We don't need to.
I just want to ask on the forward plan. I want to bring us through on the forward plan. I want to put a full report, and a detailed report on where we've got to with the mineral line coming from down near the lagoons up to the country park. We've done a significant amount of work. Jenny Urge, helped by the City Council and the County Council, have done tremendous amount of work, and I think it's gone on the back burner. People saying we should do this, you should do that, but there are 3 railway bridges in there, which is significant if one wants to take them on. So could we have a detailed, and really aimed at, I suppose, the Chief Exec, really, a detailed report to the Cabinet so we can discuss it further and further enhance this development and seek funding for it? Michael.
Certainly. Leader, could I do a 2-minute just update for you? Would that be helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So going back in history now, so the development of the former mineral line between Netherfield and the country park emerged as a concept during a compilation of and consultation on the Netherfield locality plan, and that was several years ago now. The plan included a proposal to explore the development of the former mineral line as a walking and cycle route connecting local communities and green space. Since then, the council has secured past external funding to commission studies, and those studies considered the feasibility of transforming the line to enable the wider community use. There was an initial study back in 2014, and that considered its use as a walking and cycling recreational route. And there was another study by the City Council in 2016, and that considered this concept alongside a proposed tram extension along the route as well. You'll be aware since this time the council's been quite proactive and been looking at developing the Heritage Way, and as part of that ambition to design the Heritage Way, and also that will be part of a cycling route as well. And this site, the trackway between Netherfield and the country park would form a key phase of that Heritage Way concept. Just to bring you up to date with the latest position on the mineral line, it is owned by Network Rail, and they have said that they are not in a position to develop it and have been looking for people to take it off them. There is a significant liability comes attached to it, which is why ourselves, even though it wouldn't be ourselves, it would be more like to be the county council, but they're still suggesting that it is a huge consideration in terms of those liabilities. But everybody is happy to work together to try and develop it. There was a feasibility report bid put in last year. Unfortunately, that wasn't successful in achieving funding. So we're not back to square one, but we need to start working together again to try and see how we can develop this further. So the mineral land transformation would be a key project, hitting all of the current thinking around cycling and walking. So I think it's something we really need to push. So with your agreement, Leader, I will make sure it comes to a future cabinet meeting for you.
Well done.
Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, just thanks to Mike, you know, and to officers. A lot of work has been done on this, and again, you know, it was as Mike has rightly said from the history, the aspiration and ambition of this council, you know, although it wasn't in our ownership, to improve that, as Mike rightly says, both to improve access up through to the country park, but also to respect our heritage, you know, our history. It's an important part of our history and our heritage, but also to celebrate the, you know, the lovely views, etc., that there are going up there. So I welcome the efforts to continue to press on this, Mike. And as you said, it was very disappointing that joint bid that went in by the county council and Gedling previously, you know, didn't receive the funding. I think it was a pot of funding that was earmarked European funding, but that was probably administered through D2N2, I think, or some such similar organisation. And it was disappointing it wasn't successful. I would just put a marker down, John, that Councillor Hollingsworth and I were talking about this the other night, and you and I spoke about this yesterday, that we've received communication back from a lady called Helen Norton, who has previously been in correspondence with myself and Councillor Hollingsworth last year, who lives in the locality and has responded to our Honour Our Heroes campaign in terms of recognising and paying tribute to the NHS workers, carers and key workers who have worked so bravely and courageously throughout coronavirus. And she's made some absolutely outstanding suggestions about, you know, sections along that mineral line that could pay tribute to those workers, if you like, a rainbow trail, using the imagery around the rainbow that's been used as a symbol of hope. And certainly her girl guiding units from Gedling and Mapley area are very keen to be involved. And I think anything we can do to engage our young people in remembering our history and our heritage, but helping us to plot a positive future in terms of these things, has got to be welcome, John. So I think it would be helpful, Mike, at some point, even if Helen's idea does not end up being the final idea in terms of the tribute, I certainly think there are some elements of Helen's suggestion that we should absolutely be taking forward. So I'll forward that correspondence on to you, Mike, and if somebody can maybe just liaise with Helen and stress that these ideas are being considered and will form part of the further conversations, I think that would be really welcome. And I'm sure Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Clark would support me on that point.
Yeah,
I certainly will, Michael. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Agreed, Michael. That I don't know what I mentioned, but we were always talking about our good staff. Peter's had a go at it about how good the staff are, and I think in this with Jenny Urge down there, one of our coordinators, worked so hard on this particular plan that we need to now put some weight of the full cabinet behind it to make sure that we can try and access some of that money, because there's money flying around for exercise, for cycle tracks, for this, that, and the other, and it is there, but it is that liability, as Mike. The chief executive said, it's that liability, and with 3 bridges and one of them over a major road, the 612, we've got, you know, to take it on from a small district council is a big thing. So we do need a lot of partnerships, a lot of people, and possibly the go MP to and try and lobby government to get us some money. So we're asked, any other comments on this forward plan? There are none seen there, so we're asked to we've made the comments and note it. So it's the last bit. There are no further items on the agenda. I'll thank everybody for their joining in, attendance, wherever you are.
John,
Okay.
John, just on any other items.
Oh yeah, sorry, I've just seen you.
No, it's not. It's not urgent. I just wanted to say that I did send an email to Mel some time ago that the flowers and the hanging baskets and the displays are absolutely wonderful.
They are, yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting to see any, and it was such a pleasure to go through Gedling a few weeks ago and spot that there were flowers there. And I went into Arnold this week, and it looks tremendous. So, can you just pass on our thanks? I'm sure Peter will do that.
I've done it.
because it was something that was unexpected with everything that's gone on. I think it was just such a wonderful surprise.
And it is a lift to people to see those. I just want to know how those petunias to such a size without them all going like some of mine have gone. And I do water them to feed them, but there's a certain something in there that I put into them. Perhaps it's old, some of the old beer they've thrown away, probably. Anyway, thanks a lot, and we'll speak again soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.